What we do know, as a result of the Discord leaks last year, where an individual was bragging about their access to secret intelligence online, the Discord leaks suggested that the US intelligence community had significant sources within the Russian government itself, and that there were high-level penetrations of the Russian intelligence community, but also the Russian government itself. Again, we have to guess at whether the source behind this latest assessment is or the prime source behind this assessment is a spy. It might be, it may not be, but what we do know is the latest intelligence assessment is based on the evidence available, and this is combining both the secret and non-secret material.
So Dan Lomas, thank you for being with us. What do we know now, then? New information about the death of Alexei Navalny and whether or not Putin was somehow involved?
So the new information is coming from a US intelligence assessment. This is an assessment that's comprised, we're told, of information from across the US intelligence community, so it's all-source intelligence assessment. It is coming from a range of sources. It seems to be coming from information that we might call now open source, so information such as news, social media, information from Russia itself. We're also getting classified information as well, and that's in essence what you usually would expect from an assessment like this. I think it's difficult with access to information within the Kremlin itself, access close to Putin, to make a definitive statement on this. So that this is why the assessment is heavily caveated in terms of the words that are carefully used here. But the overall assessment of the US intelligence community seems to be that the death of Navalny was not ordered by Putin himself, or at least for Navalny to be killed at that particular moment in time, and that looking at the broader circumstantial information, it suggests that Navalny's death at that time actually was something that Putin didn't want. So there was, we're told, negotiations regarding prisoner exchanges, and also the US suggests that the Russians were not as aware of the backlash, the Western response to Navalny's death. So this leads the US intelligence community to suggest that Putin himself did not specifically order Navalny's death at that particular moment in time.
Right, that's interesting, and we'll come back in a moment to Russia not being aware, or Russians not being as aware of the backlash in the West as they might have been. Let's just return us down to how we know this sort of stuff. How do intelligence services like the US get hold specifically of that piece of information? It's a very specific piece of information. That is something that Vladimir Putin, one of the most guarded men in the world, has done or not done. How do we get that information?
Well, secret intelligence agencies are operating, secret sources. They're running sources within Russia itself. We know this in the run-up to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that Russia itself has been heavily penetrated by elements of Western intelligence, and intelligence agencies are running multiple sources. So there can be your traditional spies, individuals who are working at the heart of the Russian government, who are providing information to the West. But you can also acquire information from stuff like signals intelligence, so intercepting phone calls, intercepting communications between individuals can potentially provide this kind of information. Now, in the age of open source and the age of social media, a lot of people will think that this information, or we don't have to do old school spying as you would see in sort of Cold War spy movies and all this kind of stuff. Actually, we do. There is a lot of information out there. However, some of the golden nuggets that piece together the broader intelligence jigsaw come from the secret sources. Now, in an authoritarian state like Russia, you will even there find people willing to provide information. The problem with this assessment is we don't know how much is coming from open source and how much is coming from the secret. In the US, it's estimated that something like 90, even 95% of all the intelligence assessments that reach the President of the United States are coming through open source. it's the 5% or 10% that's coming through from the secret side. That might be the case here. The US intelligence community might be relying on the broader open source information, the things that we know, in making their broad intelligence assessment. The other thing to remember is that this assessment might change. So the assessment is based on the information we know now. More information might become available as more secret information comes out further down the line.
Right, that's interesting. But I suppose we are to conclude at this point then that it is most likely, I guess given the sensitivity of this information, that there is somebody, a spy, in Moscow who's in possession of that information and has passed it on.
Potentially, we could be talking here, and again, it's heavily caveated. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the body which oversees the U.S. intelligence community and all the agencies, has denied this report and has not provided any further information. The information we have at this moment was reported by a US newspaper, which has then subsequently been repeated by European media channels. So we don't know where this specific piece of information has come from, but what we do know as a result of the Discord leaks last year, where an individual was bragging about their access to secret intelligence online. The Discord leaks suggested that the US intelligence community had significant sources within the Russian government itself, and that there were high-level penetrations of the Russian intelligence community, but also the Russian government itself. Again, we have to guess at whether the source behind this latest assessment is or the prime source behind this assessment is a spy. It might be, it may not be, but what we do know is the latest intelligence assessment is based on the evidence available, and this is combining both the secret and non-secret material.
Right. You say that there is some suggestion that Putin didn't want Alexei. Not only did he not order his death, he actually didn't want him to die at all, Alexei Navalny.
Well, I think, again, it's very, very difficult. One of the things, looking back to Russia's history of political assassinations, we do know that the Kremlin, want opponents bumped off. There have been, journalists, previous opposition leaders who have died in mysterious circumstances. We also know that the modus operandi of Russia's intelligence community is to target dissidents overseas too. Why I'm talking about this is because the death of Alexander Litvinenko, former Russian spy here in London. One of the questions that was raised at his inquiry was that did Putin actually authorise the killing itself? And this was a difficult question to actually answer here. We know that Putin has previously suggested that traitors, in his words, kick the bucket. In other words, that he wants them killed. So we do know there is a motive here behind this. Again, the assessment is heavily caveated, so it's suggesting that Putin didn't want Navalny killed at this moment in time. Again, that's something to think about here. It might be that Navalny's death at this point was not a good time for Russia in its attempt with other diplomatic initiatives. But what we can say, however, is that Putin and the Russian government created the circumstances in which Navalny's health deteriorated rapidly and he subsequently died. So even those who would say that Putin's hand is not involved in Navalny's death directly, I think you have to, say that Navalny was in a prison camp and was in a really bad situation because of the actions of the Russian government itself.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, and so when we consider where that's left the opposition in Russia, let's return to a point you made earlier, Dan, which was that there are a lot of people in Russia who actually weren't aware of, maybe still aren't aware of, the uproar, the sense of feeling that this created in the West.
Well, we know that large numbers of Russians are largely silent about the war in Ukraine, but they have their own, they are opposed to what is happening in Ukraine and Putin's policy. However, what we've seen post Ukraine is that the Russian state have been able to reinforce their hold over the Russian people through propaganda and the actions of Russia's internal security service, the FSB, and we know that the Russian government are cracking down harshly on anyone who is questioning both Putin and the so-called special military operation. So if anything, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has actually reinforced the tight grip, really, that Putin holds over Russian media, and the cracking down on dissidents here. It's not to say that there are not those in Russia who are opposed to what he's doing. There certainly are, and Western intelligence agencies, both the CIA and the UK's own Secret Intelligence Service, have actually been appealing to pro-Western, liberal-minded Russians to work with them and to provide information, but again, it's not particularly looking good for Russian opposition movements at the present time.
Okay. Just finally, Dan, has it got easier or harder since the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine, for intelligence channels to pick up information from Moscow?
Well, we know, before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we knew that Russia, despite being an authoritarian state and difficult technically to operate against, the West were actually able to acquire a lot of information about Russian foreign policy and what is happening within Russia itself. It remains difficult to operate within an authoritarian state. For example, running a spy in a police state is very, very difficult. That said, Russia's invasion of Ukraine within the Russian government circles, at least, potentially creates motivations where Western intelligence can recruit individuals. So individuals who are within the Russian government who were patriotic but who are opposed to Putin may be inclined, given what was happening during the Cold War when this was happening, be inclined to provide information to Western intelligence agencies in the hope that this will bring about an end to the special military operation and Putin's activities.
Fascinating. Dr. Dan Lomas, really nice to spend some time in your company. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you for having me on.